You are listening to the Real Men Feel Show with your hosts Andy Grant and Appio Hunter. Real Men Feel encourages men to allow and express all of their emotions. Despite what you may have been taught, all emotions do serve you. Real Men Feel is committed to engaging in discussions that most men aren't having, but you don't need to be a man to join us. The Real Men Feel Show is produced live each Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern for your growth and enjoyment. Listen to us on podcast platforms including iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. You can also watch the show on YouTube by visiting realmenfeel.org/YouTube. Come back often and feel free to add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or subscribe on iTunes by visiting realmenfeel.org/iTunes. You can follow us on Twitter at realmenfeelorg and on Facebook, facebook.com/realmenfeelshow. All links mentioned in each episode are in the show notes found on the blog at realmenfeel.org. Show your support for Real Men Feel by shopping at realmenfeel.org/swag, by visiting digitaltipjar.com/realmenfeel, or even text us a tip. You can show some love for Real Men Feel by texting Real Men Feel, that's all one word, to 504-226-5306. You'll receive a link back to complete your tip and choose the amount. This is a weekly program, and your reviews, comments, feedback, and participation are welcome during the live show and anytime in our Facebook group, on Twitter, or at realmenfeel.org. Now, let's dive into this week's show.
Hello and welcome to Real Men Feel. I'm your host, Andy Grant, and I've been saying this a lot lately. It's another special episode of Real Men Feel. This evening, we've had at least 3 shows, I think, that talked about MGTOW, which is men going their own way, and they have become definitely the most commented on programs that we've done in the almost 3 years of doing this. Most of the comments have not been pleasant or nice, I would say, but digging deeper, I have found a lot of people, guys involved with MGTOW, that have been open for an actual conversation. I've had many individuals email me really long statements of their view and the not so extreme as you might see on first glance if you have or haven't even heard of this group. But it really all began with a friend of mine, Anthony Simeone, writing about it on the Good Men Project, and then coming on the show and talking about it. A couple weeks ago, I had a gentleman by the name of MGTOW Universe come on and give the MGTOW viewpoint. So tonight, we're getting them both. We're bringing worlds are colliding. We are bringing people together, and originally toying with calling it a debate. It's not really a debate. It's a discussion. So tonight is a special MGTOW discussion with someone outside of that philosophy and someone that's a part of that philosophy. I think that's the best way to sum it up. So again, joining us tonight is Anthony. Say hello, Anthony.
Hello. Good to be back. Thank you, Andy, and welcome to our guest tonight. I'm looking forward to a lively conversation.
Yep. So our
civil discourse, hopefully. Civil discourse, perchance, but maybe not too civil for the edification and entertainment of the fans, but we'll see.
We'll
see how it goes.
And joining us from, and it's hard to say from MGTOW, joining us as a follower, an agreeer of MGTOW, I don't know, but is Dan. So Dan, why don't you say hello?
Yep. Hello, everybody.
All right, great. And
you can't see my face.
Yeah, and as is the case with most MGTOWers, you will not see Dan's face, and Dan is not Dan's actual name, and that's something that we've agreed to beforehand, and that's all fine. Now, since Anthony's been on the show before, and it's kind of in response to his appearances, Dan's gonna speak first, and this is the most debate-like we're gonna get. We are gonna call these the opening statements, and so Dan, take it away.
Well, I think the fundamental thing that all of us MGTOWs agree upon is that marriage is a bad joke, and there are better ways to find happiness in life. So that's about it. I don't know what more am I supposed to say from there. We'll have to work on it from there, but yeah. I think a lot that's said about us that is exaggerated, that is that focuses on us as hateful of women, as wanting to change the world, when all we're trying to do is just change ourselves. And yeah.
Cool. So Dan, still as part of your opening statement, were there specific things that Anthony talked about or brought up, or saw MGTOW as that riled you up? Like, you stepped forward and said, "I want to be on the show."
Well, I mean, again, what I saw from Anthony was this viewpoint that our central focus is a hatred of women, and I don't think that's true at all. I can go into explaining that in detail, but I think we'll go through that later.
Okay.
But yes, completely off the mark there in what MGTOW is. It's simply about finding your own path in life and not getting married and taking that path, which is usually folly.
Okay. Would you like to cede your opening statement?
Sure. Yeah. I guess I'm more into conversating. I don't really have a good opening statement.
Okay, great. Then Anthony, if you would like to have an opening statement, so be it.
Sure. I want to start off by saying, Dan, I really appreciate you stepping forward and agreeing to talk and have what I'm expecting to be, an agree to disagree conversation. I've gotten a lot of negative, very negative, to say the least, feedback. I've had a few videos made of me, about me now, attacking me, calling me, the usual ad hominem, which rolls off my back like water. I'm too old and too experienced to be bothered by people calling me fat or whatever all the catchphrases, whatever all the catchphrases are that are so wonderful for a simp, cuck, beta male. I might even be an omega male or a sigma male. I don't know. I'm some sort of Greek letter male, blue pill, blah blah blah. The lexicon as it goes. But I mean, regardless of where, there's extremists in every ideology, and I think that what I'm looking for is people like you in the movement. So we see MGTOW from the outside as a monolith, like any other ideology, and that's a fallacy. There are human beings, individuals that make up any philosophy. And my article that I wrote on Good Men Project, it was really the second one I wrote for Good Men Project. I purposely wanted to be a little provocative. I mean, I kind of wanted to throw it out there and see how people would react. And I don't think it was clickbait. I like to challenge people, and I like to just kind of poke an ideology. And if someone breaks down and cracks and starts attacking someone personally, that to me speaks of a fragile ego. And you, I think, are the other side of the spectrum. You actually are a secure man. You're strong enough and you have the courage of your conviction, and you have just a different way of seeing life. So I think what I'm guessing is that you're not as extreme in the realm of what I would consider toxic male behavior. And I know that's a loaded term. I don't believe that all men are toxic. I don't believe that just masculinity in general is toxic. I believe that men, many men, including myself at one point, were socialized into a set of behaviors that makes us very limited in what we can do. We're supposed to be aggressive, standoffish, aloof, constantly in competition with other men, don't ask for help, don't get mental help, don't get, so there's all of these things that are that are negative male behaviors that we're socialized in that make us predisposed to certain things that MGTOWs think that there's many MGTOWs think that there's some sort of gynocentric this is what I've read. And again, you're probably not the extreme of some of these people who, like that Sandman guy who has an internet channel about MGTOW, who's just says inane things. I mean, it's just, he's basically the MGTOW equivalent of a flat earther. He kind of feels like it's like, there's this vague pseudo Adam and Eve thing where Eve was the original sin. She tricked men, so all women are descended from the trickster Eve. And it just seems like this pseudo-scientific, pseudo-Christian morass that kind of just men are just, a lot of men don't get a very focused socialization. Their dads, if they may be, their dads may be living this macho lifestyle like my dad was. My dad considered himself the real Italian stallion. He was womanizing, cheating on my mom, blah, blah, blah. And then he wondered when my mom wanted to divorce him and lost her mind at him with rage. You know, so I feel like there's this toxic male mentality where you're like, you're not really looking at your own behavior and being mindful about your own being. And then when things go wrong in life because you're not communicating with your significant other, and I don't even think you need to get married. I think human beings have evolved, by the way, far enough that we don't have to have kids. I have a couple that are married. Why don't you have kids? Why don't you have kids? They're constantly badgered by that. Same thing with men or women. You don't want to get married? We've evolved far enough in our culture and our biology. Fine. But don't blame your problems. My biggest problem was with a lot of the narrative from MGTOW is that women, at least maybe the more extremes, and maybe you can help us give the lie to that, or that there's a monolith that is breaking here where, you know, some MGTOWs don't have to be in that extreme, you know, which also seems to go with like far right mentalities and like a conspiracy theory mindset. So I'm hoping tonight that, you know, we can do both of us a service, that I can, you know, learn more of a nuanced perspective on MGTOW, and that there's, you know, variation, healthy variation in the movement, and that you can kind of give voice to that other side. So I'm looking forward to a discussion.
So Dan, what's your reaction to that?
Anybody there?
Dan? We hear you.
Okay, good. It's just all right. Yeah, I heard everything. I think I heard everything you said. Yeah, so you're not a tradcon. That's good. So you accept that at least we have a right to not get married. I think I have a good theory to explain what you're talking about, which is we usually call it red pill rage, which is a kind of when a lot of people or a lot of guys. Did you ever see the movie Fight Club?
Absolutely. That's a great movie.
Yeah, one of my favorites.
Well, do you remember the scene where Brad Pitt explains to everyone, oh, you grew up thinking you were going to become rock stars and astronauts, and it turned out, no, you're just, you know, the shit of the world. And red pill rage is that kind of realization that you're not, no one cares about your feelings. No one's ever going to care about your feelings. And a lot of people get very angry and outlash when they come to that conclusion. And it takes a long time of self-evaluation to accept that and to be able to manage your own feelings and not need anybody else to manage that for you. But yeah, so Sandman, he's a bit of a weirdo. I think he's bisexual, and I also think that some of his viewpoints are almost schizophrenic. I don't know if they make any sense. I would recommend MGTOWs like Cultane, like the video I've suggested, or Barbarossa. Yeah, we can talk about toxic masculinity, and of course we could talk about the difference between biology and being socialized, and of course gynocentric. I think I have a brief way of explaining gynocentrism.
Yeah, if you don't mind kind of talking about from at least what your understanding is of gynocentrism. And there's also the term hypergamy that, you know, people seem really to kind of throw hand in hand with gynocentrism. So maybe you could talk about those from the MGTOW perspective as you see them.
Well, for gynocentrism, the idea is that, well, do you notice that women tend to be shorter than men? Do you notice that women tend to have higher pitched voices?
Sure.
They tend to have more nyatinized features, right? And this evolved so that people would tend to want to take care of women, right? And there's been studies on this that show that women like women, men like women, but no one likes men because we're, you know, big and hairy, and no one really wants to take care of us. They expect us to take care of ourselves. And so we have a whole society where women are the ones that everybody's trying to take care of. And we've tried to move away from that with, you know, our more modern egalitarian standards of everyone's equal. But in the past, women were creatures to be coddled and protected, and that meant that men were supposed to lay down their lives for women. As for hypergamy, that goes into a woman's sex drive and or her interests, which is basically to find a man of the best genetic stock and that can provide the most resources to her, sort of like a work mule. So those are, I'm trying to simplify the theories there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. In terms of so you're saying most of that's based on biology or biological expression, not necessarily much socialization?
Socialization is involved in there. The two of them do convolute. Societies up until now generally evolved such as to maximize the breeding of their citizens. And so that usually involved enforcing biological constructs. But yes, there is biology there. There is behaviors that we've evolved to have.
Yeah. In terms of, I don't know what you think about, the whole alpha male, beta male thing that a lot of MGTOWs are really into. Personally, I know the person who supposedly came up with the alpha males and wolves that he observed has kind of refuted that theory. And, and I think that just from my standpoint, human beings have a more complex social structure. It's not just all about breeding, and conquering each other. And an alpha male in our society is not necessarily, the most dominant male might not be the biggest and strongest. It might be the person who signs the checks of the biggest and strongest person, say like an MMA fighter. It depends on the context. It's so contextual, independent, or dependent on context that it's, so I don't know, half the time I hear people throwing out alpha male, beta male, blah, sigma, omega, and I don't see that as being applicable to males.
We can try some
human males. What's that?
We could try some different terms. For example, in that video that you did with, what was his name?
MGTOW Universe.
MGTOW Universe.
Yes. Under the YouTube comments there, somebody posted an excellent article on female reproductive strategies. And in that article, they also point out male reproductive strategies, and you can call them whatever you want. You can call them alpha, beta. You could call them cads and dads. You can call them, chads and cucks. Whatever term you want to use for them. But for men, there are two reproductive strategies that we've been using for probably before we came down from the trees. These strategies are somewhat observed in chimpanzees, although they're a little different. One is where you go around impregnating as many women as possible. It's pretty easy to understand that one. You don't put any effort in taking care of the kids. You just have as many as possible, and maybe a couple of them come out. The other strategy is, to take care of a woman, really take care of her and take care of the kids. And even though you're not going to have as many children, the probability of survival is greatly enhanced. The problem with these strategies is, of course, what the woman wants. The woman has two reproductive goals as well, which is, she wants the best genes, like from the so-called alpha or the chad or the cad, but she also wants resources and somebody to help take care of her and the children, help raise them. And so that produces a conflict of interests. So, for example, women that are focused on getting a dad will try to show off their chastity, will try to be faithful, because they want a man to stay with them and not think that the children that they have are not his. On the other hand of the spectrum, women that are very easily going are seen as less faithful. And so this produces conflicting dynamics for women, but also for men. To be a man is to be able to run around and pillage and rape in the old sense. Of course, it doesn't quite work out these days. And
Yeah.
And to be, you know, a dad equally is not seen as a very desirable position. And so we too are also trapped in these conflicting reproductive strategies.
Can I just posit something, and just let me put this out there? I mean, from my perspective, at first blush, it seems like it's very kind of a predestination, sort of like we're biologically predestined and trapped into these behaviors. And I feel like there's not a lot of leeway given here for the higher human mind. And I don't know how much you believe in that and how much is biology is destiny, but it sounds very much like you're talking like biology is destiny. And I would tend to disagree that we're entirely enslaved to our biological needs. I mean,
And
it's
I totally 100% agree with you. That's the whole point of MGTOW.
yeah. So, but in terms of social, again, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a social scientist, you know, but I dabble in sort of the statistics and in, you know, the information. But in terms of a sample size in science, you have to have a good enough sample size of a subject or an area or something, correct, to get a statistically viable result, correct? I mean, so I don't know how many women you've met in your life. I don't know how many women you've dated, but I would dare say that neither you or I have met enough women for the evidence of what you're saying. For women, all women kind of behave in a certain way, and all men, even how many men you've met in your life. I don't know if either you or I have met enough men or women, human beings in general, to really have this any kind of scientific rigor on, you know, all people have these things, and the chads and the dads and how women act. I mean, I feel like there's too much variation, and we haven't had as individuals. And you can talk about the evidence from scientific studies, but I don't know. You know, I mean, there's a lot of statistics that are thrown out that I'm feeling like, you know, there's so much variation in human higher thinking with our neocortex versus the amygdala argument that I just don't know if, I mean, listen, if you've had some bad experiences in your life, and this is what my contention is with a lot of MGTOWs, you've had some bad experiences, or some MGTOWs have had, not you, not you personally, I don't know what your life experiences are, but maybe it's, you've had some bad experiences, and human beings tend to conflate things and inflate things, and we inflate the importance of our experiences. And there's a fallacy, a logical fallacy, where we kind of, and we all do it for different things in life, we push out our experiences, personal experiences, into the world because we want to have meaning. We want meaning. We want our lives to mean something. And if we have bad experiences in life and we feel bitter, sometimes it's natural for us to go, you know what? All of this thing is bad because it treated me badly, or I had a bad experience with it, so it must all be bad. So I'm just saying, if you can respond to that, I mean, you know, at least to that part. I know I kind of put out a lot of stuff right there. So there's the view of, you know, is there really enough evidence scientifically, and there's a big enough social sample size where we can prove these things about human behavior, which honestly seems very driven by biology and doesn't take into account our higher mind. And then the other side of things, where I'm just wondering, you know, maybe is it just a lot of bitter men, you know, that have had bad experiences, and we're trying to conflate our experiences with the whole world and all of women in general.
Okay, I mean, there's a lot to go over there, but
sure. Sorry, but yeah, break it up as you want.
okay. Well, first of all, I would say most people are just running around on impulse. I mean, yes, you can override it. That's the whole idea of MGTOW, is that we can overcome this desire to, you know, get married and have kids, because that usually leads to suffering. So instead, we choose our own path in life, where we focus on being happy for ourselves. But that requires overriding a desire. You know, we all have an instinct to eat, for example, right? You agree. But some of us, you know, can control that instinct, and we can fast or, you know, eat well, exercise, and others are, you know, morbidly obese. And so I think, let's agree on this. Do you agree that most people are heterosexual?
I would think that, just based off of, you know, 7 billion people on the planet, I think that generally most people potentially would be, at least biologically, sex-wise. But again, I'm not a scientist, so on face value, based on the huge growing, exponentially growing population of the planet, sure. I mean, right.
Yeah. Okay. So you agree that at least most people have, basic parts of their personality which are set by biology, and yeah, on average, or more so than that, most people are going to have sexual desires, and they're going to think about how they're going to achieve those desires, and those reproductive strategies that I suggested to you before are near the result of that for most people, not everyone.
Right. So, but you also kind of made an interesting statement, but you're saying marriage usually makes people miserable or something to that effect.
You know, marriage and kids usually leads to suffering.
Marriage usually leads to, but isn't that kind of a big generalization though? And what about the people who
statistically, no, it's not, I mean, if we want to say generalization, I mean, like that video I suggested to you, cites a study that finds that only 13% of married couples are happier after marriage than they were single. And I mean, that's not including divorce there. Well, maybe it is. But overall, if we include divorce with that, that means that, 87% of marriages are end in divorce, or they end up less happy than they were when they were single.
But you also don't know that, or does the study talk about the time frame? Like,
well, it was
the first week after I've been married, 20 years after I've been married, when is that happiness being measured?
5 years.
Okay.
And again, I mean, my question is sample size. How many couples, how many people?
I didn't read into I can't remember it. I mean, I did look into it. I did look into the study, but I can't remember what the sample size was for that. And it cites the study. You can go take a look at that study yourself.
Yeah.
The 13 number is really hidden in there too. I don't know if they wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
But the point there is that usually if you're focused on, I feel it's a form of codependency. Like with my own father, for example, is a good example, where you try to latch onto somebody else to make you emotionally stable. And that depends on you being a good partner, and it depends on the person you're latching on to being a good partner. And usually that doesn't work out. You need to be yourself stable before you want to even try anything like that. And even then, once you do achieve emotional self-sufficiency, then you don't need marriage. It's completely useless.
But do the two need to be mutually exclusive? I mean, you can only have, self-sufficiency or marriage? I mean, do they have to be mutually exclusive?
I just don't see any use for it.
So I have a certificate in positive psychology, and the longest study on happiness done at Harvard University followed people for 75 years. Mm-hmm. And the happiest people, the most common trait among the happiest people were positive relationships. Mm-hmm. So if MGTOW is saying, I'm not going to have a relationship, I'm not going to have a primary relationship with a woman, I wonder what relationships do those men have?
Oh, well, I mean, first of all, you're not counting all the time when the relationships didn't end up positive. That's the whole point there. Like, yes, if you have the perfect marriage, or, close to that 13%, things will be great. But if, it's like playing Russian roulette. I'll give you $1 million if you play Russian roulette and there's 7 barrels in this, 7 bullets in this gun, and there's, 8 chambers. That's the odds there. Those are not good odds. And when you think about it like that, don't play. But as for, other relationships, yes, I'm politically active, as we described earlier. I'm part of multiple organizations that I do volunteer work for. I enjoy my job as a researcher, and I have lots of other people I talk to. I have a large extended family that, if they want to have kids, then I'll be the crazy uncle. So I don't need any of that for myself, though.
Sure, and I think that anyone who faults you for that is foolish. But at the same time, can't. So you're thinking that people can't really find happiness. I mean, I have a full life. I'm married. I have 2 kids. Marriage hasn't always been, like any relationship in life or anything in life, it has ups and downs. That's anything in life, from marriage to relationships with friends to a job. Sometimes you hate your job, sometimes you love it. You vacillate, you grow, you change, you evolve. So are you saying, I mean, ultimately that it's not, I mean, I have a very full life, just to get back to it. I mean, I have the things I'm involved with, activities, not involved. I have friendships that I still have. Most of the time my friendships, I don't see my friends, not because of my wife's restricting them, because we're all so busy. I mean, we're all working, we're busy. We have sports we're involved with. We have, I'm a public speaker. I'm trying to transition to a new career. I manage a department with several people at my job. I have a day job. So ultimately, are you saying that, most likely I should be miserable? Or, I mean, can't we agree to disagree and just live and let live? Or why does MGTOW need to kind of come out and go, beware men, marriage is a sham?
Well, because statistically you are an outlier. And on average, most marriages fail. And most marriages are depressing.
But that doesn't the evidence just anecdotal for that? And in my article, people took issue where and again, I was trying to be glib. I was being glib. I was being a little flip. I kind of equated MGTOW with Al Bundy's "No Ma'am," on the Married with Children. No ma'am, and like just, and that was and that was a TV show. That was a stereotype of, the stereotype of the miserable marriage. I mean, but I still feel like we're dealing in generalities, but it seems like it's anecdotal evidence. It seems like, oh, my dad said, like, for me, I know my dad said, my dad pounded it into me. Marriage is don't get married. Marriage is a joke. Women are just out to get you, but all men were out to get you too, by his philosophy. So he had a very machismo, don't trust anybody, don't ask for help, don't be weak, be a tough guy, don't be a pussy, kind of philosophy. And it really didn't get him very far in life. But in terms of relationships, but I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility for people to be married and happy. And
yeah, 13% is not an impossible number. It's just that still most marriage, I mean, that's 7 out of 8 don't make it.
But that's one study we're talking about, though.
How about divorce? Do you agree that 40 to 50% of divorces, 40 to 50% of marriages end in divorce? Do you at least agree on that? I mean, there's multiple.
Absolutely. See, there's lots of statistics that people in the MGTOW movement throw out. And one of them is, look at the divorce rate. And I'm like, I totally agree. The numbers I don't disagree with. The statistics I don't disagree with. What I'm disagreeing with generally with the MGTOW perspective is the why. What's the reason why? Is it women? Is it this biological thing where women are kind of just looking for the best genes and it seems very clinical and scientific? Or is it maybe potentially sometimes there can be devious women. They're human beings. They're fallible, just like men. Trust me, I'm sure that there's devious women that I know. I've seen some of my friends get screwed over. Absolutely. But a lot of the times the friends I know, the men I know, and the people I've met, they're just as responsible for their relationships and their marriages falling apart. And that's one of my problems with MGTOW, as I see it, is that, look, men have responsibility too in this, and a lot of times, and especially like I said, I can just see from my examples in my life that, a lot of men shoot themselves in the foot.
Mm-hmm. I see what you're saying there, and yes, that's the whole point of MGTOW is finding yourself and understanding what you want and what your limitations are. And if you see right away that you are not a person that is capable of long-term sustained relationships, like myself,
Okay.
I've been all my relationships before were very short-term or sex friend kind of relationships. And whenever things were tried to move up to the next level, I was just not interested. And,
okay. Respect.
Yeah. I've been on monk mode though for the last 5 years, and I have no problem with it. I don't need those relationships, and I understand that of myself. And I'm just saying, as a MGTOW, that we're trying to tell other men that there are other paths you can take in life. This is not the only path. That get married, have kids.
See, I respect that. I totally respect that. And I think that, yes, men should not be pressured nor women. No one should be pressured, like we were talking about earlier, to have kids or to get married. I mean, if you know that you have the bachelor bent, go for it. And anyone who judges you, screw them, fuck them. Go. I would totally, I support you 110%. You know, and that my only issue has been, maybe it's the more extreme people. Maybe you are the average MGTOW. Like maybe you are the rational average MGTOW, and it's just the squeaky wheels get the grease. They're the ones that shout the most and are the most extreme are unfortunately the ones people see most in our sort of myopic social media video clip culture. You know, maybe it's, you know, the stupid Sandmans of the world, and, you know, some of the other idiots who are quick to say lash out at someone like me who just pokes the beehive a little bit and says, you guys sound like you're just blaming women for your problems. And then I get like videos, people calling me a fat cuck or whatever, you know, and then it's, so maybe, you know, and this is enlightening to me. So, and this is, again, I really appreciate you, you know, kind of giving some variation to the monolith of, you know, MGTOW is not a monolith of just women haters. It's, you know, it's, you're right. I think, you know, there is a cultural stigma, but again, I'm feeling like, you know, maybe it's, you know, it isn't like this gynocentrism or anything. Maybe it's like, again, men, you know, there's a question I wanted to ask you about the divorce rate. That's those statistics too. I wanted to ask you about the statistics for, and especially gynocentrism in the courts, in the court system. Could you talk to me about your beliefs on that?
Well, again, that goes back to the idea of an instinctive desire to want to coddle women. And so that's where we see that in the courts, where, you know, there's philosophies like the tender year doctrines. I'm also a member of NCFM, so I'm part of the MRAs. So I have discussed this in detail with people. And so generally, yes, the courts biasly side with women purely on those kind of impulses.
Has that changed in recent years? Because from my anecdotal evidence, that has changed.
Some cases where we have, you know, seen change just in those cases, but I mean, statistically overall, the problem here is that most women prefer to marry men that make more, or at the very least as much as themselves. That's what we call about, hypergamy. And so as a result of that, when divorce comes along and divorce law is set up such that the one who makes the least gets to take, you know, 50%, and oh, that was also the one that was taking care of the kids. So that one gets to take the kids, gets to take the house. And so that's usually the women, because again, you know, as we were talking about before, before this debate, men and women on average have different personalities. And so on average, women are going to choose to want to be the homemaker. And that will put them in the higher position when it comes time for divorce.
I mean, in terms, again, I don't argue with the statistics, you know, and I don't argue with the statistics. I'm just wondering at the why. Again, the why. Is it potentially that, first of all, there may be two things. Maybe society and again, unjustly stereotyped men as being, you know, not fit for being nurturers. Men are nurturers, according to the stereotype of rough and tumble men. You know, I think that there may even be a societal aspect that enforces a certain type of disposability and toxicity, supposedly, of men. You know, men are, you know, they're not going to raise those kids right. They're not going to attend, you know, the kids aren't going to grow up right. They're not going to nurture them or attend to their boo-boos or whatever, which I think is crap. But also, speaking of, again, toxic male behavior, let's call it that, because I know toxic masculinity is this thing where you say that people in the MGTOW, especially the extreme MGTOW, say, oh, you're calling men toxic. No, we're talking about how, you know, listen, when I grew up, I'm going to, you know, share a little bit here. I don't know if you heard this I think I talked about this in my last interview with Andy. You know, my dad basically treated me like a piece of shit because I didn't fit up to the male stereotype of working on cars and chasing after tail and being a tough guy and don't talk about your problems. You know, he thought I was a little faggot because I read books and wore glasses, you know, and just wanted to sit around and be an introvert. I was just introverted. I wasn't, you know, I wasn't a pussy. I was just an introvert, you know, and you know, my dad berated me and belittled me for that. And it was because of his programming and the programming probably of people before him. He came from a very Italian, macho, Italy. I mean, he came right off the boat from Italy. It's a very machismo, male, macho culture. So, you know, his son, born in America, didn't fit that stereotype. So I was belittled by him. So, you know, it's, you know, there's this toxic male stereotype that I think shot him in the foot because he wanted to go run around, do whatever, all the while claiming it was women are the root of all evils when he was going out and breaking the marriage compact first. He was the one, you know, running around and being an idiot and being a jerk, you know, to say the least. And so ultimately, he had no right to any kind of, you know, my parents' circumstances were different, but he left the house. You know, my mom took care of us initially. And, you know, he groused, oh, what the hell? I thought there was supposed to be amicable divorce. Well, you know, he didn't deserve it. So that's my other side of it is, yes, maybe society is seeing men in a negative light or we as limiting our nurturing potential. But at the same time, out of those divorce percentages, how much did the man shoot himself in the foot? You know, through adhering to behaviors that didn't make him seem like a nurturer because they were part of the macho male stereotype.
Okay. There's several ways I could try to attack this. I mean, first of all, I mean, what does toxic masculinity have to do with MGTOW? I don't that. So
Do you want me to elaborate?
Please.
Okay. So a man who believes that he needs to be tough and aloof, he can't ask for help if he has mental issues, if he's depressed, if he's sad, he can't cry, he can't talk to other men because other men are competition. So these are all doctrines that I've seen repeated in the realm of what I would consider to be negative male socialization or negative male behaviors. And I've read some studies. I don't have them in front of me. You know, I've read some information. A lot of my evidence is, of course, anecdotal. So again, I'm not a social scientist. But when people talk about negative male behavior, they're talking about a set of behaviors that include aloofness, intimidation, being angry, being hyper aggressive. Mm-hmm. And men, I feel, are taught to be that way. That's not biological. Biologically, I think men are, you know, they have positive traits. I would say, though, that socialization of like not being, do you agree that men, if they're feeling sick mentally, should ask for help?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. A lot of men would say, oh no, I know men who are liberal as fuck, to be part of my French. I know men who are liberal as hell, but they will not, you could shoot them in the head before they would go to get therapy. Okay. That's toxic masculinity. Like, you can be liberal, but you can be like, oh no, men don't ask for help. Men don't get mental health. That's weak. You know, there was just a report recently where they did a study of a few hundred firefighters. Some of them were women, but a lot of them were men. And they have mental counseling to go. They have a horrifying job. They have mental counseling that's offered to them gratis for free. They don't. The majority of them, especially the men, don't take that because they're afraid of being seen as weak. That's toxic masculinity.
What does that have to do with MGTOW?
Okay. What does it have to do with MGTOW? Specifically, it has to do with whenever I see someone talk about toxic masculinity, men again, maybe these are the more extreme people. They say, oh, toxic masculinity. First, it's a knee-jerk reaction. Oh, you're saying men are toxic. People aren't saying that. So I'm saying that maybe you don't have a problem with some of the things I'm saying. And again, I'm going to let you respond. You know, I've laid out a laundry list of what, you know, toxic masculinity, the aspect, the behavioral aspects of what it means to be, you know, it's an over exaggeration of male aspects where you're not just strong, you have to be intimidating. You're not just self-sufficient, you have to dominate. You know, it's this socially supportive, it's supporting yourself and others socially versus being the beast, the master, the alpha, where you shrug off all competition and you keep everyone at bay because no one's getting over on you. So it's that aloof, rugged individual, I'm an island, I don't need anybody else, where I feel like, especially in some of the attack videos that I've seen levied against me, it's like, you know, I feel like the opposite is the cuck. the beta male, so I feel like the beta male only exists because of the macho male, the alpha male, and the alpha male is like strong, secure, doesn't need anybody else. Like, you could be strong. It's not strong is one thing. Like, that means you're self-secured and you have, no doubts about yourself, where you can overcome things. But like, then I feel like there's this other side where you have to be tough as nails and you can't let anybody in, and, don't reveal your feelings.
Okay.
And I'm just saying that those behaviors of being this hyper masculine to the point of toxicity, that shoots men in the foot in the courts when it comes to divorce, because they're seen as being more aggressive, less emotionally available, and therefore they can't nurture, things like that. So maybe we're shooting ourselves in the foot because we're letting this negative male, hyper male toxicity kind of overcome us.
Okay. All right. A lot of things to go over there.
Sure.
What to go with first? Okay. I think you're conflating MGTOWs with PUAs. MGTOWs, we
Okay.
don't look up to alpha males as, oh, that's what we should be. We should be alpha males. We don't believe in holding frame. That whole idea, the whole alpha male mentality, is about attracting women, and it's self-destructive, as you described already.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the next part about toxic masculinity. Who decides these traits in people?
Okay. I mean, I feel like it's self-evident that if someone, man or woman, and again, I feel like women can display these traits and they're negative.
No, not display. Who decides this?
Who decides it? Again, it's the observer. And again, maybe it's, again, a stereotype that society has unjustly foisted upon men. And I'm a man, so I'm invested in this. So I have skin in the game. But who decides? I think it's evident that if someone's walking around trying to intimidate other people, they're standoffish. It's self-evident that if someone's walking around being hyper aggressive and going, what are you talking about? And I live on the East Coast, man. You make eye contact with a lot of guys here. Men's eyes follow me on the street as I'm walking, looking for me to look at them the wrong way. Like, that's toxic masculinity, man.
Okay.
When you have a chip on your shoulder all the time, and that's self-evident.
Yeah.
Have you ever felt uncomfortable about it around the dude who was just like, come on, man, like he just gave
sure.
off a run. So that's, yeah, right. So that go ahead.
At who decides? I'm talking about, who decides these norms in society are idolized, right?
Right.
Since time immemorial, we elected for men that were, as you described, toxic. They wanted, a tough guy that would run out there and defend them, die for them, be, a bull. And that's what women selected for. And so we have this pressure, both social and biological, to be like that. And it's not a way to happiness. I guess for some guys it works out, but generally it doesn't. And the thing, though, is to realize that you're being pressured into that role, both biologically and socially, and that women do have a place to play in that. That's not just something that guys have pushed each other into. Women have selected for this. And so I feel that from you that there's this desire to immediately turn around and say, no, all the MGTOWs are doing this. You're just blaming the whole outside world, and it's really their fault.
No. I believe that there are devious men. I believe there are devious women. I feel like, again, I'm to give you the benefit of the doubt, and I don't know your experiences, growing up or with relationships, or how it seems like your dad had a tough time with his relationship. For me, so did, my mom had a tough time with my dad. So, our personal experiences color our views per chance, and so maybe there's some origin story there. But you are potentially, I'm guessing that you are part of the majority of moderate, like, MGTOWs. It's the way it's kind of shaping up. I'm saying that it's the far kind of extreme of MGTOWs that are sort of in that, what I thought was like a unified whole. And, and again, that's just not realistic. That wasn't realistic on my part as far as that was concerned.
Well, I'm glad you understand that. But let's look at it from a different angle. Do you agree that there are feminists who believe that men are the cause of all evil in the world.
And I believe that they exist, and they're just as idiotic as the people on the other extreme. Extremism is abhorrent. I mean, if they're just as extreme feminists are just as much scapegoating. If they're saying men must die, men are the root of all evil, I feel like that's just as bad and reprehensible as anyone on the extreme other side that give MGTOW a bad name, if to put it that way. So I totally believe that moderation is the key, and to not see other sides as balkanized, homogenized in their thought processes and groupthink.
Okay. Good. Let's see. We went over hypergamy. My spelling's horrible.
Can I just say one thing though? Just from my own marriage, I mean, I'm going to put it out there. I was poor as heck when we got married. So my wife did not marry me for my money. And I don't know if my genetic breeding stock. I don't know if my genetic breeding stock is the best, man. I mean, I've always been overweight.
If you read that study, for example, women often don't just look at the man as he presently is. They make estimates on what he will become. And if they see something in you, then they'll fall in love with you. But I mean, it's the same thing. Like, we accept that most men, when they look at women and they see, a nice pair of tits and a nice ass, when they see that, most men are attracted to that, right?
Sure, I think that's a biological,
Exactly.
a knee-jerk reaction biologically. Sure.
When a woman looks at a man and she sees, a handsome Adonis who's rich and has incredible skills, that too is something that she's biologically attracted to.
Sure. I mean, biologically, a chiseled man. I mean, I don't begrudge my wife. It doesn't mean she's going to leave me.
But it's not just visual.
Right.
Women, they also examine, what skills does the man have? What resources does he have? That too, they are attracted to.
But on a biological level, or is that more cerebral?
Yes.
It's not more cerebral, though, if you're evaluating someone's checkbook? I don't know. It's,
if you have a desire, then no. I mean, yes. I mean, you're using higher brain functions to actuate a lower desire, though. You still have this desire to attach to a man that has lots of resources. Instinctive.
Yeah, I mean, generally it seems like that would be more, human higher consciousness function of okay, he's got this car, he's got these resources. I mean, I guess I can see how it overlaps biologically, but,
Okay, but to also get sexually aroused by that requires a lower brain function as well. So,
okay.
So, for example, you might cook a really good meal, and it requires higher brain functions to prepare all the recipe and everything. But you have a lower brain desire. Well, I want good food.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Good point. Yeah, it's a good analogy.
Okay, and I'm not talking about all women. I'm just saying most women. Just like most men are attracted to nice boobs and a nice ass.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, and I don't know. Yeah, I'm almost wondering if you're seeing a correlation, and I don't know how many other MGTOWs that are more in your, if I may, it seems like you're more liberal. I think we had some conversations, earlier before the show started. More liberal.
I have a very good theory for why that is. Why so many are on the far right or on the alt right, and when I had years ago come to the realization that marriage was not for me. And I went through several years thinking I'm just some rare person that has come to this conclusion all on his own. And then I discovered MGTOW, and wow, there's thousands, if not more of them. It goes all the way back to Diogenes in Greece, the philosopher. Lots of guys had figured this out. And the thing, though, was when I discovered MGTOW was back during Gamergate. Do you know what Gamergate is? Oh, did I lose your audio?
No, sorry. I was they just cut out a little bit.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So what happened here is I feel a lot of people on what I would call the control left or the radical left, far left, what they've done is they've ostracized a very large section of the population, which has come back to bite us with, say, the election of Donald Trump. And that's what happened here, is that they've pushed out people, and the right sucked them up. And you get called a Nazi enough times, or sexist misogynist enough times, you'll say, oh, well, what's so wrong with being a sexist misogynist? And
I agree with you 100%. I agree with you.
This is everything here.
Yeah, and I've talked to some, just, you make a great point, because I've talked to a lot of liberal people, and, the sentiment is, well, if you don't understand, what the left is after, then, you're part of the problem. And I'm just saying, my point has always been, well, you might want to watch out, because then you're not going to be recruiting many people if you're just as intolerant as the far right.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm saying, if you want to go by sheer numbers game of, if you're just kind of, again, I think the problem is, and I think what we're discovering here is, like, the problem is seeing the other side of a philosophy, or anyone who disagrees with you. I think our civilization has a sickness of seeing it's not enough to disagree with the other side. The other side is a threat to your very existence now. There's such a bubble on each side, and there's balkanization on each side. There's such polarization that the other side has become demonized. So the far left has done it to the far right. And yes, in between are the moderates going, I just want to exist and live and be happy. Yeah. And, it's at this point, you're going to go to, human beings want to belong. We have a biological imperative to belong to a community, because that's how we serve, part of our survival mechanism.
And
so
I would say that's you might describe that as a higher or lower brain. I don't know how, but what you're describing is tribalism. We humans have this tribal desire to see others as the other and demonize the other, and to see us angelicize ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of tribal mindset, though, has been very costly, especially in these times where we have very complex subjects that we need to be able to moderate on politically. And we can't, thanks to a kind of media that is profit motive based, and thus tries to shove as much clickbait in your face and try to do as you did, for example, just troll for attention.
Called out.
Okay. See, all right. Now I need to take issue with that, but go ahead, finish your thought.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, what did you expect when you make statements like that? You're going to get trolls to come back at you.
True, you're going to get trolls, but can we also say, speaking of statistics, that trolls represent a smaller percentage of the population?
But I mean, that's what's making all the threats against you and people that are mocking you and stuff.
Sure. The difference is I can take it. My ego isn't as fragile as theirs, I would contend.
Oh.
But I mean, listen.
All right, hold on. I just muted you, Anthony. I'm gonna take the reins and bring this in for a landing, and we're gonna go to some rapid fire zone with some questions that I had. Some of them are for both of you.
And vacuum in the background, is that too bad? I'm sorry.
No, I don't hear anything on your end.
Oh, okay, great.
Oh, you can't hear me right now because I'm.
So Dan, you said this earlier, and I just because men are biased towards protecting women, women are biased towards protecting women, that no one cares about protecting men.
Correct.
Right. Okay. So that kind of counters the traditional tough guy, masculine idea, and says that men need protecting. So it seems to be raising an issue of vulnerability for men, which I think is fantastic. So do I have that accurately?
Well, I would say that the idea is that men have to support themselves, and that, the ideal man is, that tough guy that supposedly has no problems and is, yeah, I mean, yes, in truth, though, a lot of men do. We do need to have interactions. We do need to talk about our feelings.
Right. Okay, so does MGTOW, and again, I get that it's a philosophy. There's not like a club you go to. There aren't like get-togethers, at least that I'm aware of. So does MGTOW serve as a way for men to feel protected? Does MGTOW allow for other men to feel like someone is looking out for them?
Yes, sort of. I mean, the idea here is to achieve, the emotional self-sufficiency, where you're not looking towards a woman to care for you and to love you. You don't have that goal, which is, a goal that most men are not going to get, no matter how hard they try. And yes, we focus on interactions with other men. We focus on other ways to find gratification in life. But I don't see that, that viewpoint of the toxic masculinity viewpoint of men have to be strong. That's something that we don't really care about. That's not really our concern.
Right, and that's so I'm seeing that. I just wanted to make sure that wasn't my interpretation on something. But yeah, you're saying MGTOW is saying that no one's looking out for us, and we need to take care of ourselves, and we as men shall gather and help each other.
Yes, sure.
Okay, cool.
Or if you want to be a loner, you can be a loner. You go your own way.
Right, and your own way means walking away from the idea of marriage and romance, and it could be friendship with other men, could be the monk life, could be isolation. It's whatever you choose.
Correct.
Okay. One of your online comments said that love is a lie. You don't need it in your life. It's not a major part of your life. That is BS. My question is that referring to the idea of romantic love, or the love for parents and children and dogs and ice cream? Like what did love mean in that?
Of course you can have those other ones. It's just that romantic love is, I don't want to quote Rick here, but it's just a chemical reaction in the brain that compels animals to breed. It hits hard and then it fades fast. Yes, that's the whole problem here. A lot of men want romantic love. They want to be loved, right? And most women are not going to love you. It's just statistics there. Most women are looking for a smaller percentage of men than the other way around.
Okay. Now I have a question for both of you. So Anthony, you're going to be unmuted now, and I'll let you go first. So just require
let out of the mute cage. Let me.
So I've seen multiple men post that MGTOW is all about saving men's lives. So Anthony, do you see that?
I would say for those men like Dan who have made the choice to see the world the way they do, and I mean, as grim as I may think that viewpoint is, that love is a lie and it's just chemicals. And listen, I'm a Rick and Morty fan too, so I think it's not just men who are like, on the MGTOW or MRA or spectrum that can watch it. I'm just saying, I think yes, MGTOW can save men's lives if they are looking for a place to go where they can get free of societal judgment that says, get married. Why aren't you married? You're a weirdo. What are you, gay? Why don't you have a woman? Blah. I think that, again, we have evolved beyond that socially, biologically. You don't need to have a long-term relationship. Honestly, I think they were just called confirmed bachelors before there was MGTOW,
Okay.
And it's a shame, but I think it can, if that's the philosophy that supports you, and you find a supportive group of men, which is what Real Men Feel is all about.
Yep. And that's why I loved seeing this idea. So I'm totally behind any group philosophy, anything that's trying to save men's lives. So Dan, do you see that MGTOW is saving men's lives?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I would say, especially for the men that have come out of horrible marriages, they were told their whole lives that this was the goal, and now that they've flopped out of it, they feel as they're complete failures. And that's usually, when a lot of guys take a gun and put it to their head. We're providing another path where we say, no, that was, not the right way for you. And there's better ways to achieve happiness in life, and you don't need to try doing that again. And you don't need to consider yourself a failure for having not made it.
Great. And Dan, has your view of MGTOW changed since you first encountered it to now? I don't even know how many years that is. Can you tell me that?
Oh, I don't know how many years. I mean, it's been a while.
Okay.
I think it says, what was Gamergate, like 2014? So that's when I was like, oh, wow, I'm not the only one. And then from there, I read into the different philosophies. And yes, there's a huge range of different philosophies. And I disagree with some of them. But I mean, the basic premise that marriage is a bad joke is something I've agreed with since the beginning.
Okay. Yeah, and so even within men going their own way, there's lots of room for you to go your own way.
Correct.
All right. So, Anthony, has your view of MGTOW changed since you first discovered it, heard about it?
It absolutely has, and I mean, again, I just want to say, I wanted to be provocative. I don't know if I would quite say it was clickbait. Your beliefs may vary, Dan, but I think that any philosophy should be able to be tested and should be able to be questioned and have people not collapse and degenerate into ad hominem. So I'm glad that you are a higher being than a lot of the other MGTOW. So people like you. And people like you have changed my mind. Men like you have evolved my perspective on MGTOW. So you have shown me, and others. There have been men who've come out on my Twitter page. Besides shouting at me, they have messaged me and tweeted me and said, "I'm sorry you're experiencing this. I'm a MGTOW. I'm sorry you're experiencing this." I've gotten emails from several other MGTOWs who say, "Hey, listen, you want to talk? Let's talk." That's what I was looking for. Like, if MGTOW wants to support men, save the men who disagree with you too. Save the men who may, be happily married, and say, you know what, I don't believe that love is a fool's bargain. I think that who are we to question? I think live and let live. Who are we to say what's wrong for the other is right for the other, is not right for the other, etc. I feel like, you and I could at least agree to disagree. Whereas some of the people who have flamed me and attacked me, are those who have the fragile egos and who are unevolved, so to speak, and who are man boys. They're the real man boys. They need to do some growing up. You, sir, are a man, not a boy, as far as I'm concerned, and I applaud you for that. I still think that I would love for us to agree to disagree. I would hope that you don't think I'm a dupe or going to go, because there's been lots of people predicting that, oh, wait till it happens to him, then he's going to come over to MGTOW. Wait till he gets divorced and she takes all his shit. He'll be crawling to MGTOW. I'd like to think that you would maybe give people like me who feel like we're happily married. Yes, nobody's marriage is perfect. Everything rises and falls, but that's just the nature of life and everything in life, not just marriage. So maybe we can agree to disagree and just move on. But Andy, my opinion, thanks to Dan and other people, have shown me mercy and not trolling from the MGTOW community, have showed me that it's, I need to evolve on my perspective. So thank you, Dan. I appreciate that.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. I agree with you. I mean, I felt you were looking my butt a bit there, but
okay. Dubious till the end, right?
I don't think you need to label them. If there's people that are trolling you and attacking you, they're going through their own mental processes, and they're going to have to figure out their own way. But I mean, the same thing as you were saying about other men that are married, like yourself. You look. I knew a guy that I was friends with who was a heroin addict, and I warned him, but nonetheless he's functional as a heroin addict, and I believe he still takes to this day. But go do what you do. If that's what you do, I can only provide my advice, and if you disagree, then oh well. I wish the best for you. And
okay.
and you don't have an impossible chance to not end up having a functional marriage to the end. It's just it's a low.
So I'm in the 13% then. I'm one of the lucky few. I'm the exception to the rule. All right.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Time will tell. Time will tell.
Yeah.
But
Get to put it in your will to check in with a MGTOW site once you're finally gone, and how are you feeling, right?
Well,
yeah, listen, hey, but I hope that, you mentioned maybe a little bit of skepticism towards my accolades towards you. I hope you do take them sincerely, because honestly, whether you believe me or not, they were sincerely meant. I do appreciate your humanity that you've shown me.
A bit older than many of the other people you've met, perhaps.
Okay. That age could definitely moderate things. Maybe, yeah, that could be a factor.
Dan, in one of our conversations before the show, I believe it was you that was telling me that, there are plenty of MGTOWers, because most MGTOWs hide behind a false identity, have some anonymity, because sharing views that can be seen as controversial can get people in trouble in their community, at their job, that a lot of guys just like to poke, as Anthony has now said that he was doing too. So some of the nastiest comments are people that are really just, in their views, oh, we're having fun, we're just poking this idiot, as opposed to representing MGTOW.
Yeah, well, I mean, there is, the downside to anonymity, in that a lot of people can do that. express whatever opinion they want, even if they don't even believe it or not, just for the fun of it. But yes, many of us MGTOWs, we can't express these opinions openly. Even if things as like James Damore for Google, even his statements were so atrocious that he had to be fired. So that's a problem. But as long as we are not allowed to speak openly, we can't be challenged openly, and so we're going to have these kind of problems.
Do you experience grief for not being married? Do people bug you about that, men, women?
Especially from my parents.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
I'm the eldest, so the sooner my brother has kids, the sooner I'll be able to look there. See there.
Yeah, there you go. Genes are passed on. Leave me alone.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So I do want to bring this to a close. Dan, I want to thank you, and I want to thank every guy in whatever philosophy you ever have that has taken the time to comment publicly, that have taken the time to email me directly. I like Anthony, I've been called a mangina a number of times, and I've been thanked for being objective. Yeah. So I'm glad to be an objective mangina for the people that feel that way. That's fine.
You're a good cuck, Andy. You're a great cuck. I love you.
But one email I got, it was the last sentence in this email, which was really an essay. I'm gonna ask him if I can publish this, but I haven't had the chance to. But he sums it all up saying, overall, I'd say MGTOW is a very individual philosophy, and no two men will have the same journey. And that is really what I'm finding, and I think, Anthony, that's what you're finding as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's that's just the reasonable thing, that there's no, in human behavior and thought, yes, there's much variation. So I'm being reminded of that. I'm not perfect, and I had one view of MGTOW, and it's definitely evolved, and men's rights in general. And hey, I watched the blue pill. The red pill. Sorry, I watched. Sorry.
How telling is that?
Freudian slip. I'm sorry. I watched the red pill, and I'm reading things that people are sending me. So I'm trying to be honest and putting myself through my paces and saying, you know what, I'm going to give this a fair shake. And I appreciate, people being patient with us as we are evolving, and I'm evolving.
Cool. When I created Real Men Feel, my goal was to create a place where it was safe for men to share whatever the hell they were going through. And now, again, the third or fourth program centering on MGTOW, I feel that more than ever, because I feel like we've made a space where people could be furious with each other and then find common ground as well. And again, so I thank every guy that's watched any of these shows that has taken the time to write me, post a comment. And, I'm all for saving men's lives. I'm all for men finding happiness in whatever way that works. And my initial view of MGTOW was, here's this group of angry, bitter guys blaming women and then blaming men that don't agree with them. And they just thought they would just isolate themselves more and more and more. And again, now I'm seeing, maybe I was just seeing the happy anger of one particular troll or whatever it was. But exactly. So thanks, Dan, for opening my eyes. I had not heard of this group at all until Anthony first wrote about them. And I can honestly see a time that I could have joined easily. I gave up on marriage, and then I found the woman I married. But it was only after I gave up and said it was all bullshit and not worth my time. Mm-hmm. So,
anything could happen.
There you go. Right. And plenty of people go to casinos. If casinos paid off 30%, they'd be even more packed, right? So.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, just don't focus on that as a goal. If it happens, it happens. It's great.
Yep.
But your goal, number one goal, is to develop yourself.
Amen.
All right.
Okay. Well, cool. Hey, and I think, and Andy, hey, way to go for, you're definitely more patient than I am and more open-minded. So, but yeah, it's definitely been an enlightening experience, and I'm looking forward to growing even more and learning even more and meeting more variation in various men in MGTOW. Hopefully we'll get to talk to them more often. I'm looking forward to it. So
cool.
But agree to disagree, and let's be civil and have some virtual beers even, but let's just remember we're all men and we all, need each other, so.
Yep. So however you're doing it, keep being happy. And if you're not happy yet, find your path to happiness.
Yeah, agree.
All right. Thanks again, guys, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you for listening to Real Men Feel. Until next week, visit realmenfeel.org or the Real Men Feel Facebook group and share what you thought of this episode. Please give this podcast a review on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you are discovering Real Men Feel. Reach out to us at realmenfeel@gmail.com. Show us some love by visiting realmenfeel.org/swag or digitaltipjar.com/realmenfeel. Learn more about Andy Grant at theandygrant.com and Appio Hunter at appiohunter.com.